Hello and welcome to Your Property Empire. I'm Helen Daly with you tonight, and on tonight's show we do have a lot. We're going to talk about what is happening to our lending markets at the moment, and will the clampdown by banks affect you? And with less than 3 months to the end of the financial year, what can you do to minimise the tax you pay around any properties you own? And what are some of the common mistakes that investors make? We seem to do it all the time when it comes to their financial returns. Well, joining me tonight to comment on our stories is Stuart Waugh, who's the Director of Bell Partners Accountant. Welcome to you, Stuart. Evening. Good to see you. And also Charles Tarbey is the Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. Charles, good to see you, and thanks for joining us. Now, let's get on to it. Charles, what do you think is happening with lending at the moment? I mean, it does seem the banks are getting tougher, and we know APRA is leaning on them as well.
I think it's the correct move, and I think it should have happened quite some time ago, because the issue with the marketplace right now is most of it's being judged based on what's happening in Sydney, which is the wrong thing to do. But I do think that people need to be put on notice that the market could change at any time, and I think keeping those rates moving slightly upwards makes people feel a little bit more uncomfortable about getting out and buying and fueling the marketplace, which is what they've been doing. So I'm encouraged by that process, because, Stuart, at the end of the day, the Reserve Bank, what can they do? Because if they reduce interest rates, which they did before, it impacted negatively on the real estate market in that it went crazy. Yep. And so they did it for economic purposes. So it really is back to the banks and APRA to start controlling the process in terms of property investment and interest rates.
Well, this is interesting coming from a real estate guy.
Obviously,
we expect you to talk up the market and say, oh, nothing to see here, there's no bubble. We don't necessarily use the B word, which of course APRA doesn't want to use either. They don't, quite seriously, they don't seem to think it is that. But you mentioned about it being, it's not all about Sydney, and we've seen the price rise over the past year in Sydney. We've seen Melbourne is almost up there in the mid-teens, or is in the mid-teens, but parts of the rest of the country, Charles, are patchy.
Yeah, my greatest concern, Helen, is that if you make a decision, again, based on Sydney, you're in trouble. They talk about negative gearing today, talk about capital gains tax again today. It's a very hot topic, and affordability and supply. But if you do something here, and just because you're reading the stats in Sydney, you do something here, you're going to decimate other parts of the country that are struggling. We've got properties in Perth that are in negative territory. They're negative equity. What do you do about them? How do you encourage investors to invest over there if you're going to remove capital gains tax?
Yeah, well, that seems to be off the table.
I hope so.
I don't know whether you caught either of you. Sorry, I'm going to bring you in, Stuart, here. I mean,
he's going to do this. He's going to do all the next part.
There's so much to talk about with real estate. We will get onto it. But, Stuart, the banks do seem to be, they are getting tougher. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yes.
And not before time?
Oh, no, absolutely. I think it's something we need to do as well. I mean, having a mortgage, buying a property, all these things that we strive to do when we were a couple of years ago, or even 5 or 6 years ago, and now it seems to be thrown around a little bit kind of too easily. And
you mean the money is?
Well, the money being thrown around, yeah, and even interest rates been so low that they won't be low forever. And the fact that we're kind of throwing it towards everybody, and prices are going on the way up, and even $100,000 at 4% is only $4,000 a year. So we've got like these kind of numbers going around when someone's at an auction and throwing 100,000 around because
they think
costs $4,000.
Pay four grand back. So do you think it was right that the banks are finally, and perhaps they were forced to really by the regulators, it is right that they're cracking down particularly on interest-only loans?
I mean, interest-only loans, absolutely, because what we're trying to do is trying to own more. We're trying to own more of the property and trying to basically pay it more, pay it off. It's a good position to be in later on in life when you've got properties that are worth whatever they're worth, and you've got lower loans. So paying principal off, I think, is important. And it's not everything's for tax. We always say, for tax purposes, don't interest-only loans and things like that. But sometimes it's nice to get in front and even for longer longevity of a loan, like the more you pay off, the smaller term you've got on the loans. Therefore,
one of the danger zones, though, with fixed interest rates, if they're for too long, is that you could come out the other side having paid a an interest rate at this level, and by the time the loan is up for renewal, the interest rates are at this level, and all of a sudden, not only has your mortgage not reduced, but your repayments have gone up.
Oh, exactly.
And that's one of the biggest issues with fixed loans, if they're kept for too long.
But who is taking out fixed loans
It's
in this
been
sort of
encouraged,
really low interest rate environment?
It's been encouraged a lot around the place. I encourage my children to take part fixed and part variable, so that they've got that balance of the two. And part of it's protected, and if they want to reduce some of their debt, they can do that on a variable loan. They can't do that on a fixed loan. So it means that they've got the opportunity to reduce debt at the same time as still stay in touch with the marketplace and interest rates.
Yeah, just while we're on this subject, and I'll play devil's advocate, which maybe Chris Gray doesn't necessarily always do.
He's terrible to us, isn't he?
He's all right.
He's terrible.
Why would you encourage people into property? I mean, there has been a feeling in Australia, property, only way to go, best way to get a return, safest houses.
Well, see,
because properties in cities like Sydney and Melbourne have gone up probably
they have,
since
but
the
I
1950s.
don't agree with getting into the market for the sake of getting into the market. I actually don't believe in that. I think that people buy property and they go, we'll get a great rental return on the property, but rental return doesn't mean you're going to get capital gain. So I think people need to be careful where they buy. And so,
the yield hasn't been great.
No, it's been getting worse.
It's been getting worse.
And rental rates have been dropping of recent times. So I think that it's important that people, if they buy correctly. They don't buy because they want to get into the market or they're pushed to get into the market to own a property. And again, I know that's quite the opposite to what you might expect from me, Helen, but it's what I see over a very long period of time that people really should be encouraged to do. Take their time buying a property.
All right, so both of you, is now, say, let's restrict it for the moment to Sydney and Melbourne, which we have seen big price rises, is now the time to buy, or do you sort of think, maybe I'll sit for a while?
No, I mean, overall, I mean, always buy a property which has got something distinctively differently about something else. Like, so for example, if there's houses that are all the same and they're all a row of 10 and there's nothing distinctive about each of them, then basically what you're doing is just a supply and demand. You're basically selling property exactly the same as one next door. Why would it be worth more than one next to it? Whereas you're buying property that's got something distinctive about it, or something you can do something distinctive to, then that's going to be a property that you can hold for long term. And we are talking about a long-term investment, not a short-term investment. So those kind of things are very crucial.
Yeah, there are some interesting places still to buy because the halo effect is still moving out. And so, again, I wouldn't say to people go out and buy because the Sydney prices are going to go crazy. My daughter bought a property a year and a half ago, and I thought it was at the top of the market myself. And
well, that's right. For the last 2 years, we've thought, this is the top.
You know, it moved along a little bit, and she got married on the weekend to a lovely Scottish boy.
Congratulations, father of the bride.
I've been entertaining the entire Scottish entourage here, and they have, one of them, Uncle Andrew, was having a bit of a crack at the Aussies, and I said to him, what's the difference between a Scotsman and a canoe? Do you know what the difference is?
Hope this is clean because
it's
live, right?
One of them tips, and I think he understood it. From our side, so Uncle Andrew, you watch out for me next time. So I think buying real estate is still a good thing, but you've got to be very careful where you buy.
OK, Stuart, just on this issue, we were talking about, banks going harder against interest-only loans. What sort of mix should they look for in a loan?
Well, I mean, I'm with Charles. I mean, I think that basically what you should try and leave as variable is the loan you're prepared to pay off.
So they should be paying some principal off.
Well, absolutely. I mean, as I said before, trying to own more of the place is going to be the ultimate end game.
Yeah.
We're all looking at trying to get some cash flow from these properties later on in life, and the more cash flow you're going to get is the less the loan is as far as interest on that loan. So absolutely, you should pay some of it off.
How do we make interest deductible?
So interest, the purpose of a loan. So basically, interest is deductible when you've got what was the money used for in buying whatever it was buying for. If there's income coming off the back of what you've spent that money on, then it's basically the interest is deductible. So, for example, if you're using money to buy an investment property, because that property is earning earning rent, therefore it's got interest deductibility. If we can't refinance a property from, say, it's gone up from 5 to 6 and use whatever money you get out of the back of that refinance to go buy a thing that doesn't produce income, because that's not deductible. So it's all about the purpose of the loan and is it earning income, whether it's deductible or not.
All right, just briefly, how do offset accounts work?
So offset accounts are basically just a place to park your money while while you're not using it for something else. And that basically means that the loan of $500,000 with $100,000 in offset, you're only getting interest charged on $400,000 remaining outstanding.
Right, so you have to have the $100,000 to and not need to use it for a while.
Well, no,
the offset account work.
No, you can bring it out whenever you like. However, for the time that it's in that offset account is when the loan is actually reduced to the offset amount.
The banks calculate it daily,
Yeah.
so they'll look daily at the amount of money that's sitting in that account and they'll reduce your mortgage by that amount. And off you go, and you can take that money and come and go. And a lot of them, the banks will attach a credit card to it, because you get 55 days interest free. But the best part about that is that the banks, that's another way of earning revenue, because they do lose a bit of revenue on the offset accounts.
All right, and briefly, Stuart, is there any other way that borrowers potentially can sort of maximise these changes that are happening now, or go with the right change?
I mean, looking at fixed interest rates and making sure you're forecasting as far as what's going to be the best way for you to have the most deductibility is definitely a way of looking at it going forward. The way that also you get some security as far as knowing what your repayments are, those kind of, the fixed interest rates definitely do make that appealing to you. However, as we were saying before, it's also important to have a variable part of the loan, because that's going to mean that you're going to hopefully have a term of the loan for as short as possible. Okay,
Charles, I want to ask you, because you know the market upside down, back to front, and front ways forwards. What is going on around the country?
Yeah, the clearance rates are something that we keep a very strong focus on, and they've been very strong. They were actually stronger again in this last week than they were this time last year, Helen. That's the thing.
Really?
Yeah, stronger. Last year, the national clearance rates were 67.1%. This week, they were 77.6%. And Sydney led the way with 81.5, followed by Melbourne at 81. And Canberra came in third. Now, Canberra's been a very strong market. They came in at 69.8% clearance rate. So really strong, really strong. So the issue for us is always how much stock comes onto the marketplace, and that's been in the negative territory, not greatly, but this week it was negative 2.88% over the last week.
Get your hands on
We're just
stock.
not getting the stock, not in the right areas either. That's the biggest issue. It's moving out very quickly in the right areas.
Does that mean people don't want to sell, say, in these very hot markets, even though they know they'll probably get a good price, because they then
They can't buy.
They
can't buy. Unless they're downsizing, unless they're going and buying their dream home in a holiday area, they're not going to do it. But this is absolutely the best time if you are a downsizer. This is a really fantastic time.
All right, and residential rent price moves?
Yeah, they were negative this week, 0.46% over last week. Yeah, across the country. The biggest reduction was in Darwin at 0.36. That was followed by Hobart. Hobart is a good capital city to invest in, but 0.28%. But Sydney went backwards this week, and that hasn't happened for quite some time. So overall, not that big a movement, but still, it's just a slight movement. You'd expect the rent movement to go up over a period of time, but it's been very, very steady for a couple of years now.
Okay, and residential vacancy rates?
My favourite one. Sydney was the best at 0.41%. Absolutely stunning performance of vacant properties, 0.41%.
Sorry, just what does that mean?
It means that 0.41% of all properties available were vacant, that's all. Whereas if you go to Perth, it was 8.13%. And Perth was in the tens recently, so Perth is actually recovering nicely. And Melbourne was at 1.54%. So those vacancy rates tell you a lot about these individual markets, with an average of 3.36% over those three capital cities. Yeah, there you are.
And what about homes advertised for sale?
Yeah, no, they were the ones that were still negative. Yeah, they're still negative. But, you know, Helen,
that's the supply
That's
issue.
the one we need. We really, really need that to change. And that comes down to the state governments and local councils, not interest rates, not negative gearing, not capital gains tax. Get something happening and get developments through in a lot quicker space of time, and you'll see a massive change. And this is something we've talked about for the last 4 years on this show. We've been flagging that warning for a very, very long time.
Yeah. Well, you've got the Treasurer saying the same thing, basically.
Yeah,
really,
I hope
get
so.
more supply out
4 years to get there.
Yeah. All right, Charles Tarbey, we're going to say thank you and goodbye to you. Thanks for joining us today. But after the break, I'll continue my chat. Hopefully, Stuart Wall will stay with me.
Absolutely.
Yep. And we'll also take a look at our property of the week, so stay with us.